we start to talk about something and we kind of go back and forth, Charlie's always like, save it for the podcast.
Yeah. Like, stop talking.
Just let us talk about it. Like, hey, what do you think about this? Save it for the podcast. And so somebody said that yesterday. Somebody asked me something about, I answered a couple of general questions, but they asked me something and I was like, save it for the podcast. Nice. Drop us a voice note.
All right, let's get started. I will play the intro song. You guys can feel free to sing along.
It's another Friday. This week I did it my way. I made lots of juice and now I feel a boost. Baby say, oh, it's the way I make my juice. Pressing fruits and roots. This week I did it my way. Baby say, oh, now let's have some fun. There is nothing greater than Fridays at Goodnature.
Ooh, welcome to Goodnature Radio. This is your host, Charlie Wetlaufer, with my esteemed co-hosts, Chef Ari Sexner, the #1 juice business consultant, the author of The Juicing Companion, and Olivia Esquivel, founder and owner of Southern Press Juicery and the Wildcrafted Collection, also consults for companies looking to help with front-of-house operations and marketing. If you'd like to send us a comment or question by leaving us a voice message to play on the air, head over to goodnature.com/radio. That's also where you can request a free 30-minute consultation with our team of juicing experts here if you're struggling with something in your business, or you're looking to grow or start a business and you want some experts on your team. Head over to goodnature.com/radio. All right, so how's it going this week, Ari?
It's going great. I was singing along, but I accidentally muted my microphone, so...
I don't know. I don't think you guys even know.
Good for you guys.
I was disappointed.
I didn't mute my microphone, so I'm going to need some
Olivia at least tried,
that,
but she doesn't know the lyrics either. So
yes, I do, and I expect royalties for that backup.
You guys have got some homework to do this weekend. So we are all in Buffalo Monday and Tuesday, shooting some new awesome video content. We're putting together some courses. Chef Ari is going to have the ultimate juicing business startup masterclass course. Covers everything you could possibly imagine about, like, I don't know. What are some of the topics, Ari?
Yeah, I mean, I just sat down and wrote everything that could possibly be asked for about a week straight, and we recorded videos for all that. Stuff like learning how to be teaching creativity, sanitation, special on just green juices, smoothies, milks. I mean, everything you think of.
Man, those green juices looked good. I walked in right when you were finishing the green juice segment, and there was such a beauty and variety there. It's crazy how, like, the green juice, you think they all look the same, but from a lighter green to a darker green, I mean, it's like all the Pantones there. They looked really nice.
That's cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then, all the back of house stuff, like dealing with sanitation and organizing the kitchen and keeping stuff cold and logbooks, and that's all in there. It's going to be an awesome course. It's going to take us a while to put together. I'll say maybe be ready in a couple months. And then, Olivia, you were shooting a course at the Acai Bowl Masterclass course. Maybe you can give us a couple high-level details on that.
Yeah, I think I started with prep, right? So we started. That's a question I get a lot: is how to prep your front of the house for bowls, and particularly as you grow into a larger volume, and how you batch that out. So we started with prep, and then we actually went through my top 2 acai bowls that are,
World
award-winning.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just somebody say it so I don't have to.
You were waiting for that, right?
I was like, so where's my bag? Hello, where are my hype people? So we went through those. We went through, even one of them is a milk base. So we talked about how the milk was made on a Goodnature press. And so that's really helpful because it helps those two classes really collide and work together. And then I went through even making the granola and what that looks like step by step. And then, I think that's it. I didn't have as much as Ari. I'm just getting started. Ari's,
Yeah.
he's got a few years on me.
But I'll say that was the first time I actually tried one of your acai bowls, and it was pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean
thank you.
Blending the milk and banana in with the acai just makes it so rich and creamy.
Don't give it all away, Charlie. Yeah, easy.
Well, I'm not going to tell them all your secrets.
Drop the details. Okay, yeah. They need the masterclass for that.
Makes it such a rich and creamy base instead of just like a lot of times you eat them and they just taste kind of like frozen ice, kind of like blended up or something. Yeah. But the bananas and nut milks really add a whole nother level to it. So
it's about those fine details that are you can't really write down in a recipe. You know, the fine details on how to steps to make every little ingredient. You know.
Well, I mean, when you make a million bowls, just like when you make so much juice too, it's like you can read a recipe, but it's really about, like you said, the process. And after you do it for so many times, same thing. I mean, sometimes I watch, Ari talk about juicing and I'm like, wait a minute, is that how we do it? Like there's always something to be learned about the mechanism and little tricks of the trade to, as you're producing these things. So it's really the method that gets you there.
I feel like in cooking, once you get familiar with all the methods of cooking, you don't even really need to go by recipes. You just kind of look at, okay, this dish has these ingredients and is cooked in this method. That's all you need to know. Then you just kind of can figure it out because it's all about the process. It's not really about just the recipe, you know?
Yeah. I remember when I first was introduced to a support kitchen where we produced large amounts of everything. You know, like we'd make a dressing, it'd be a 55-gallon batch or something like that, large amounts. And I remember it's you miss out on one fine detail and it could add an hour onto production. You know, like cutting cherry tomatoes, a whole case could take 10, 15 minutes, or you could flip the lids upside down and cut it all the way across all the cherry tomatoes and cut it in like a minute. So it's a crazy how much goes into those fine details.
Interesting. Yeah, and that's what all of our courses, which will be part of the new School of Juice, which I'm super excited about. These will be the first couple courses of many, hopefully, to come. And it's really teaching you the process of how professional, successful people in the juice business think about these things. Like, Olivia, you've probably literally sold 1 million acai bowls, right? If I had to guess.
Yes.
Over the years.
Yeah. And there's one time I calculated it and it was pretty close to that.
I mean, on a busy day, you'll probably sell hundreds when you're running your buy one, get one deals and stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, that takes a lot of practice. There's making an acai bowl and then there's making 200 acai bowls.
Right.
And
the
keeping the quality consistent and the cost of goods and still being able to pay your staff and run a business and everything. So that's pretty cool. I'm super
know what you can skip on and what you can't skip on, you know?
Super excited about these courses. I think it's really going to be super beneficial to all of the Goodnature customers and people thinking about becoming part of the Goodnature family. So everybody listening, keep an eye out for that. We will definitely let everyone know when those are coming. Like I said, it'll probably be a couple months. yours might come sooner just because it's a shorter course.
Oh, nice. Can I add a professor to my LinkedIn?
Of course. You don't need my
to add professor. Yeah. Oh, okay.
You can do that right now. So speaking of this same sort of topic, today I'd love to get into the importance of having a chef on your team as a juice bar, because a juice bar really is a restaurant, basically, right? It's not much different than another food and beverage business. So I do want to get into that. That will be the longer topic. But before I get into that, there was a question on the Goodnature Juicing Facebook group a few days ago. And I'd just like to get your guys' opinion on this. Juice bar owners, this is from someone named Sarah. Juice bar owners, what is the one piece of equipment other than the juicer that you would tell all new juice bar owners they need to have, and need to have is in quotes? So I guess we'll start with Olivia on this one.
Okay, she knew we were going to say juicer.
Right.
For me, I think it has to be a really good quality blender. Even if you're not doing acai bowls or smoothies in your shop and you're just doing juice, we use really high quality blenders in our back of the house to finish out our nut milks. Obviously you press the milk in in your juice press, but then if you want to add some sort of flavor to it, like if you want to make a golden milk with turmeric and cayenne and pepper, or if you want to make a vanilla flavored or a chocolate flavored or a matcha or whatever with that almond milk base, or any other nut milk base, and you really need a good quality blender to be able to take that product to the next level. And I think the beauty of that is it helps you expand your offerings in the case without really needing to go into food and go into smoothies and go into bowls. So for me, I would say a blender.
All right, Chef Ari?
Yeah, I'd say sink. I mean, outside of a sink, refrigerator, all that required stuff, it's absolutely a blender. You could be able to make those smoothies to orders for customers, which go great with juices. I mean, make your nut milks. You could even do some light cooking with them. Mm-hmm. They generate heat. You can make soups, blended soups that way. Dressings for salads. There's lots of possibilities with just adding a blender to your operation for sure.
Do you remember in my class, I kind of went over how we create some of our products that we put on top of our bowls with the blender, dry products, like, a crumbled Brazil nut or something like that. So it's really, in my mind, it's like people ask me food processor or blender. That's usually the question that I get. And I think I would pick blender. So I'm glad I had the same answer as Ari though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everyone's always happy when Ari answers the same. Okay, so there you have it. Final answer, blender. Get a Goodnature juicer, get a blender, and then you'll be making millions of dollars in no time.
Be able to afford a sink and refrigerator.
And maybe a roof and internet and tables. Okay, moving on. The importance of having a chef on your team. So I learned about what a chef really is. So for my education, I got a degree in hospitality management from UNLV, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, which is like the #1 hotel school in the world. And part of our training was in culinary. So running a restaurant, managing cost of goods, inventory, serving hundreds of customers, managerial accounting, like how to read P&Ls and balance sheets, learning HACCP. I actually had to get ServSafe certified, which is a training you go through to get HACCP certified. And for like a big final project, we actually had to like run a pop-up restaurant for a day, like our group or whatever. Learned a lot about culinary, and we took some cooking courses. And so that's when it really sort of opened my eyes to what a chef really does. It's so much more than cooking, right? Like, I think before I actually learned about the industry, I thought a chef was just really good at cooking, almost like an artist. But there's so much more behind it than that. It's about running a profitable and safe food and beverage business.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then so I graduated from there and then started working for Goodnature full time. And then I met Chef Ari, and that's sort of how we got to know each other in Vegas. And I brought Ari onto the team. And I think one thing we've done a good job at Goodnature is having a chef available for people to reach out to when they need it, because I really do think it's important. And Olivia, I know you also have a full-time chef on your team, right? Chef Hank. Correct. So you obviously saw the importance of that and realized it's important to have a chef on your team. And like at Goodnature, all of our recipes are made by Chef Ari. So if you get juice recipes from us, they're made by a real chef, and we were thinking about all those things when we made those. So I think it's super important that everyone, when they're thinking about starting a juice bar, you realize you are running a restaurant. whether you're just selling juice or you're selling juice and acai and smoothies, or especially if you're selling like sandwiches and salads and stuff, you really are running a restaurant, even if you're just calling it a juice bar. And you need to either have a chef on your team or have access to a chef. So, Ari, I guess I'd like to talk about your chef training a little bit. Like, I kind of gave high level of what I learned in hospitality school, but only a few of our classes were about that. So maybe could you educate us on what you learned in chef school?
Yeah, for sure. The general overview of it is just as much different styles, learning about the styles of cuisine, from, breakfast, lunch, dinner to global cuisine from all over the world and how people eat. And basically half of the classes would be about that. And then the other half would be outside of the kitchen, from stuff, how to structure a menu, where people read it, how to food cost, sanitation. You wouldn't believe how much they could fit into 3 years of school, essentially, 3 or 4 years, sometimes 6 years even. But it's about the fine details of everything. If you kind of glimpse over a general what a chef does, you're missing out, because there's the schooling, which teaches you quite a bit, and then there's real world experience, when you're actually in the kitchens. And both are equally extremely important, because when you're in the real world, you learn just as much, even sometimes even more, mostly by making those mistakes, and figuring out how to fix those problems. And when they come up, if you do everything correctly and then a mistake happens, it could be extremely challenging to kind of fix that. So,
yeah, Olivia, maybe you can tell us a little bit about why you hired a chef and how having a chef on your team has helped.
Yeah, so I started Southern Press Juicery with a partner who is a restaurateur, a businessman, not a chef, but has 8 or 9 restaurants, all chef led, has a hospitality group. And so I had the concept. We got together, and I was like, I was trying to play it like, this isn't going to be that high cost to start, like just say yes. And he looked at me and he's like, we're not doing this without a chef. Even if you just hire a chef for 6 months to get us started. And so I remember, this is my first dip into food and bev. And I remember I said, well, Carl, you have like a corporate chef. At that time, you had 2 corporate chefs and probably 8 or 9 executive chefs, countless sous chefs in the company. And I was like, can't we just borrow one of those? And he was like, no. This is a whole different cuisine. These chefs have no idea how to set up a juicing restaurant. Yeah, they could come in and tell you, maybe where to put your 3-compartment sink and things like that. But, the specifics of having, for us, we have an X1, the specifics of having the X1, located next to your 3-compartment sink, if that's the sink that you're using to wash your produce, or your back sink, the space that you need. It's just regular chefs, I think, aren't used to the amount of produce that comes in and gets used in one day and gets shrink down to nothing. So you really need somebody that's trained or that's willing to learn from somebody else that's trained on how to balance the back of the house in terms of produce that's coming in. To me, that's the biggest challenge. My largest restaurant, Southern Press Juicery, has a really small back of the house, and we're constantly saying, man, if we were to redo this store, maybe one winter when it gets real slow, we'll close it for 2 weeks and we'll just expand the back of the house forward, because our walk-in is so small, and it's unbelievable how much we can, produce out of that small kitchen. But it takes having a chef who knows how to really lay out that kitchen in the right way. And so I'm on my 3rd chef now, and he didn't have a juicing background. He's not a classically trained chef, but has been working, in the kitchen since he was a young kid. And it took him, I would say, a good 2 months on the job to really understand, all right, this is how we run this. And it was things that even I couldn't really tell him, because I really don't hang out in the back of the house that much in terms of inventory. I never did inventory. My other chefs always did inventory. And so it's interesting. I was talking to another juice bar yesterday on the phone, and pretty impressive operations, doing over $700,000 in revenue a year out of one shop. And we started talking about, how the back of the house is run. And I was telling her about Chef Ari, and, she wanted to change some things in the front of the house and expand to multiple units. And once we started getting into the conversation, it became very evident to me, and then to her, once I explained it, that there wasn't much I could really fix for her in the front of the house until she spent some time with Ari in the back of the house, really learning how to calculate food costs. I can help you with your menu and design it and talk about it on social and get people through the door. But if you're not calculating food costs in the right way, and you have no real idea of what your inventory is and what's a superficial food cost and what's a real, food cost, it's kind of all for nothing, really, because you don't know what you should be promoting. You don't know if you're losing money or making money. And so it's, to me, as a non-food and bev person, it always sounded really scary, because I just don't come from that world, but even more reason to have a chef on your side. And I would say too, it's the thing that I tote the most about. I mean, we joke about, how my bowls are award winning, but if you look at any description of Southern Pastisserie, the first thing it says is a chef-led restaurant. And, I was kind of thinking about that. Even if you don't have the bandwidth from a revenue standpoint to pay for a full-time chef, I really recommend spending time with Ari. And if you are working together and he's helping you with these recipes, I mean, the branding in me is going to say, you really could say you're a chef-led restaurant too. I mean, even if it's not a full-time chef, and I'm always going to come from that angle, but really, I mean, if you're getting led by Chef Ari from, even if it's just seasonally, and you touch base, whatever, in the fall, and then in the spring as produce starts to change, and, things start to change in the kitchen. And I think you could say you're chef-led, right?
Yeah,
I
for
would.
sure. I mean, one of the things too is if people aren't experienced in, a lot of times it's very rare that it's the case that someone's really experienced in the front and the back of the house,
right?
So I think if you're not experienced in one of those cases, for instance, the back of the house, a lot of times, if you don't go the route of having a chef or a consultant, you tend to just find stuff that people have done before, pull stuff online that, a juice menu or something like that. And the thing is, the menu, it's extremely personal. It's for that demographic, that location, and all these things. It needs to be extremely customizable, specific to that area, and you kind of lose that, and it could save you tons of time and money in the long run, for sure.
I've heard some complaints of other consultants in the industry that they sort of you reach out to them, you work out a deal, and then a few weeks later they just send you a bunch of recipes, and they don't really get to know you or the business, and they're giving you the same recipes they use for somebody else's business, or you're not sure, and I think it's important that, you really have access to your own chef, whether it's on your staff or consultant. Make sure they're a real chef and they know what goes into creating a menu and worrying about costs and pricing and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think the services we offer, like the menu development sanitation plan, it's stuff I've done thousands and thousands of times. When I was a chef at a restaurant, we used to come up with 4 or 5 different tasting menus a week, for different operations. So the stuff that we offer, I'm extremely passionate about, because I know it's people that are investing their livelihood into something hopefully succeeds, so I definitely, there's a huge amount of trust involved. And the stuff that we offer is stuff I feel there's a ton of value added to that product.
Ari, has there been any, or I guess when people come to you for help, what are the most common sort of issues you see in these new juice bars where it would have helped them a lot if they had worked with a chef or had a chef on their team?
I think using the menu as an afterthought, it's kind of seems a little backwards when you're setting up an operation. I like to put the menu first, maybe even right around when you're writing a business plan initially. The reason behind that is when I have the menu, I know how I could do a much more accurate equipment list. I could begin to kind of cost out my recipes, add that to the business plan, see how much I should charge for the juices, do some research on there. I think a lot of times a big mistake people do is they have their business plan, everything set, all their equipment, and then kind of put together a menu towards the end. I think adding the menu first is extremely important.
Does the menu ever drive the design of the kitchen or anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Once you have that, what you're going to offer, you'll be able to put together an equipment list, see exactly where you could lay out everything in the kitchen. It helps because it's something you can kind of focus on, figure out your vision, get that out of the way, and a lot of things can really fall in place right after. Even the setting up purveyors, where to order the produce, order guides, all that stuff.
I guess it also forces you to ask a lot of hard questions in the beginning, right? Like, are we doing all organic? Are we doing conventional? Can we find these ingredients, or do we need to change what we're thinking? Or, what products are we doing? Are we doing smoothies? Are we doing bowls? Are we doing salads? That's going to drive equipment purchases. And it makes sense to do that first.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but we see it all the time in the Goodnature Facebook group, people asking, hey, how much are you charging for ginger shots? And I think that's okay if you're just kind of wondering, like, what can the market bear? Like, hey, by the way, in California, we charge this. What's the market looking like on the East Coast? I think that's a different question than sometimes it seems like that question is originating from, what am I supposed to price my ginger shots at? And right away, I'm like, whoa. It matters not what I'm charging for ginger. What matters is, what is your food cost? What are you buying at Publix? Are you buying in bulk? Are you buying together with another store? Are you buying conventional? Are you buying organic? I think that's really where you need to stop and ask yourself, if you're asking other colleagues what you should be charging, then you're missing a really vital step in profitability for your business, which is calculating food costs and calculating it the correct way. Like, I remember the other day somebody was saying, like, oh, how can I lower my food cost? I have a food cost of like less than 20%. And I was like, what? Like, can you send me your guide on how to do that? Because a lot of times, and even at Southern Press Juicery, we've done this before. We got caught calculating food costs incorrectly. Like with our bananas. I think I told you about that, Chef. Like, not peeling the bananas and just calculating the food cost for the entire banana, not calculating how much of the banana we were actually using and the peel we were throwing away. And so again, like for a non-math person like me, it all sounds really scary. But the beautiful part about working with somebody that knows how to do that is there are literal worksheets that you can tailor to your business that are hooked into your price of your inventory, which you need to be taking inventory at the same time. No exceptions, not I have a late night and I don't feel like counting it tonight, I'll count it tomorrow. Be really strict about that. And then you can tie all those documents in together through formulas and even tie in your recipes so that anytime you think, hey, I want to try a new fall smoothie or a new fall juice, a pumpkin pie milk or whatever, you already are set up with Chef Ari to be able to put in what your recipe is on that. All right, I used 3 dates, I used 2 bananas, I used whatever, pumpkin puree, and it should calculate a food cost for you based on what you're paying for your products. That's when you price your menu. And after you calculate your food costs, that's because they're not all going to be the same. You're going to have some that are loss leaders that you just say, hey, everybody loves this. I'm willing to take a hit on it. I feel like it's a hole in my menu and I want to have it. And others that you're just going to print money on, right? Because you got to have those too. That's when you start to design your menu. That's when you start to think about, what am I going to promote on social? What am I going to recommend that my staff start talking about to guests coming in? Because really, your staff should be talking about not what their actual favorite is, but what's your most profitable item on the menu. And that's, some people are like, oh, you're just deceiving people. I'm like, no, listen, this is a business, guys. And so we need to know, and everybody in your operation should know what makes us money and what is a nice to have for your guest. That's true for, I think, any restaurant, right, Chef? I mean, you don't make a ton of money on, especially with the price of crab going up. You don't make a ton of money on crab cakes, right?
Yeah.
But
or
you
like
make them on other items in the menu.
They train the servers like, you guys want to start with an order of fried pickles or something, like they're pushing their high margin items, right? Yeah,
but it adds a huge amount of transparency as well. Say like a guest comes in and be like, why am I paying $10 for this bottle of juice? You have the cost there. Oh, I'm putting $3.50 worth of produce in there. This is how much my bottle is. Or when you have, say wholesale accounts, or not really wholesale, but people want to buy bulk amount of juices. You can go ahead and tell them, okay, I usually run a 25% food cost. If you're buying in bulk, I'll go up to like 35%. Here's my cost, and be extremely transparent with that amount as well.
Well, and two, I think it allows you from an operation standpoint in the front of the house to know what kind of, like you just said, from a wholesale, but even to the guests, like when you need high level sales, high volume sales, it allows you to know how far you can discount, right? Not just for a bulk order, but from a day to day. Like if I've got expiring juice, what's, obviously selling it for something is better than selling it for nothing. But if I'm just thinking, oh, wow, I know February is going to be a slow month, so I really got to hit them big with January cleanse sales. I, for instance, always do a cleanse special where the cleanse is discounted, or they get some sort of promotion like a cooler or, something like that. But I have to know what my food cost is, my actual food cost is, to be able to say, okay, this is the promotion we're going to make, and this is how much money we're going to how much money we're going to make based on that production, based on that promotion. And that's all because I know the food cost of every single juice that's going in that 6-pack carrier of cleanse. So, I'd really say, like, I can help you design a menu all you want and tell you what to put up on social and how to talk to your guests, but we're shooting blanks unless we know if we're making money or not.
Yeah, I remember part of the classes I took, they taught us about purchasing, and even just something, it seems simple, like you just order produce, but there's like these purveyors try to do all kinds of tricky stuff. Like they'll put you'll get a case of bell peppers and they'll put all the pretty ones on top. So when you're doing your random sampling, which is something you should be doing when you're purchasing, right? Yeah. Like if you're getting 5 cases of something, you pull a couple random ones out of each case and check the quality. You need to be reaching to the middle of the case, not just the top of the case. That's where they'll throw all the like rotten looking ones in. Stuff like that, which you'd never think about, which a real chef has had plenty of experience with.
Yeah, having multiple purveyors is great as well, because you never know. The price of produce changes every day. You want to go ahead and be vigilant in finding out what's out there, shortages, price fluctuation. It's common all the time.
Do you ever, does having multiple purveyors help you negotiate with them as well? Because they know, like you can tell them, oh, well, purveyor A is charging this. Why are you charging me this?
Yeah, to an extent, it definitely helps, especially if it's consistently happening and it's from the same farms, and maybe that's an issue for sure. It's great for shortages, but having those multiple purveyors helps with shortages. If the price is insane all of a sudden, there's tons of reason to have multiple, but I would say definitely have at least like 2 major purveyors and then someone local, that uses those local farms and be able to supply you that really local product.
Based on that, for us, apples, obviously, because the amount of juice that we do, apples is one of our, larger ingredients purchases. And our chef just switched from, we use apples all year round. So our chef just switched from getting that from our really large purveyor to getting that from a local farm because we can get it, we can get the quality better and get a better price. So yeah, you really need to be, have several resources out there. And, I think the hardest part as an operator is having a chef that is solely a creative and not willing to learn the business side. But it's really, like I was telling you, Charlie, in Buffalo the other day that, my chef, we just had our food and wine festival. My chef was like, Olivia, I want to do a plant-based dinner and, in the next coming months. And I was like, do it. Because, he's so good on the business side, but he's also a true chef. And so if I don't get him out there and let his creative juices get flowing, then, who knows what might happen? A juice bar, you can get a little bit creative, but if you're a true chef, they want to cook for people, And so, you just got to make sure that you've got a chef or somebody in the back of the house, if it's yourself, if you're the owner operator, that is as passionate about, I would not just say the operation at the back of the house, but my experience in food and bev so far has been the chefs that are the most concerned about sanitation are the best chefs. Like the chefs that I work with and like Chef Ari, we kept talking about the fun, classes that Ari was doing. And I wanted to taste all this stuff, but he kept talking about his sanitation and his HACCP plan. And we were just laughing at each other. I'm like, all right, yeah. I would eat off the floor of Ari's kitchen. And that's what you really need for a product like what we all serve is because as Chef Ari said, there's no kill step plan. There's no way to really prevent, passing on a dangerous bacteria or an unsafe situation unless you have a safe sanitation plan. And so I think it's really important that when you're working with a raw product like we all do, that you've got somebody like Chef Ari on your team who you can just have in your back pocket to talk about and to talk to when you've got things like that come up, DHEC inspections, whatever. Yeah,
and just to explain, Olivia mentioned there's no kill step. That's like the industry lingo for something like pasteurization that makes the product safe by killing harmful pathogens. Basically, in raw juice, there is no kill step. So if you use produce that's contaminated, or you cut it on a cutting board that's contaminated, or someone didn't wash their hands and their hands are contaminated, that goes into the juice. There's no pasteurization step or kill step to make that safe. So your kitchen has to be extremely clean, which is why some health departments get really bent out of shape about raw juice. Back in 1992, there was the big E. coli scare from Odwalla, which was making raw cold-pressed juice on Goodnature machines, by the way, even back then, and shipping it all over the country. And they used to have these sort of audits and inspections regularly, and they got a bad report and said that the kitchen wasn't safe the way they were cleaning. This is all from public court documents, by the way, that I looked over. And so they sent this contaminated apple juice, and E. coli comes from basically like animal poop, I believe. So these apples fall off the tree, they get on the ground. There's some animal that had E. coli, so the E. coli gets on the apples, and then you don't wash the apples properly, and that little bit of E. coli gets in there, and now all the apple juice has E. coli in it. So they ended up shipping this E. coli infected juice all over the country. A bunch of people got sick. A couple people died. Some people developed long-term issues from it. It was like really a big issue, which is when, after that was what triggered the FDA to put in place the rules of no wholesaling raw juice, which is something the U.S. has that most countries don't have. So health departments get extremely paranoid about raw juice, and it really is important to have a super clean kitchen. And yeah, I would say if a chef isn't worried about sanitation, you need to find a different chef.
Something you need to think about too. I know a lot of Goodnature folks and just juicing people in general start out, particularly now with rental rates, start out in a shared kitchen. where you're
that's
paying
a really good point.
like you're paying for a co-space, just like if you're co-working space. So it's something that you really need to think about, because at the end of the day, the Department of Health is going to come in and judge the entire facility, not just the space that you're working in, and not just test your space, right, Chef? So you really have got to make sure that although you don't know what's happening before your rental hour or after your rental hour, what you do know is what you can do to maintain a safe environment for handling raw, unprocessed foods in the time that you're preparing it. And so again, that sanitation part is, it's just critical. I still get, nobody ever forgets about that E. coli with damn Odwalla. I still get a monthly notice about that from Department of Health. Like,
really?
I'm like, okay, yes. I'm like, okay, guys, we know.
Yeah.
Don't
Bring
forget
it up
about
old
the
news.
19. Yeah. I'm like, come on, let it rest already. Like,
That's kind of a step I always tell people too. Like one of the first steps, like, oh, have you worked in a kitchen before? Are you familiar with that? If not, then take the Serve Safe. Start that process to familiarize yourself with the sanitation that's required. That's extremely important. If you've never been through it before, or even if you've been through it, talking with the health departments, there's a lot of information in a little bit short a period of time. When you set up a meeting with them, before you start investing in this operation, and tell them about the process you're going to be doing. They're going to provide tons of requirements that you're going to need when you start that operation. Take a notepad, write everything down, make sure they sign off on it just to verify everything's correct that they wrote down. Just get it as involved as possible with figuring out the sanitation aspects.
Well, and I would say, and then call Ari, because so often, I don't know about the other states, but at least in the states that I operate, North Carolina and South Carolina, we're required to have a Serve Safe. I always say that backwards. Serve Safe? Safe Serve.
It is, yeah.
Serve Safe manager, manager on duty at all times. And so like I'm certified in Safe Serve, not just as a food handler, but the manager certification. All of my managers are, my chef is, and then key holders are. And so those are little things that, you could be ready to open up your operation and nobody freaking tells you that. Like right. Nobody tells you that, until the Department of Health guy or girl walks in. And they're like, let me see your certificate. And I was like, what? My what? Like,
it's also very obvious. Like you can just kind of cruise the Goodnature Facebook group and you see people talking about cleaning procedures and stuff that they're not familiar with proper cleaning procedures. Like it's a 3-step process. You wash, rinse, and sanitize. That is like the 100% required step for washing anything in a kitchen, whether it's pots and pans or juice bottles or your machine.
Cutting boards.
And a lot of people are like, oh, I just rub it down with apple cider vinegar or whatever. And it's like, I guess that might be one of the 3 steps, but it's not.
Well, that and everything's abbreviated, like person in charge is PIC.
It's impossible to know unless you're trained in it. It's just impossible.
So I do take tons of calls where people meet with the health department, they write their notes down, they sign off on it, and we just have a conversation going through those notes, kind of breaking it down. I've meet with them all the time. I've had countless meetings with them. I write everything down. I read over it after the meeting and kind of fully understand what they need or required.
I know, Ari, you even dealt with the Department of Agriculture when you're going through the certified organic process at Bellagio, and I just remember you telling me what a kind of a process that was.
Yeah, it was a while ago before they kind of outsourced that product. A lot of times the states would be able to certify organic operations. So this was really challenging, get thrown in there where you're working with the Department of Agriculture and our local inspection agency was the Department of Health. So we had to develop a HACCP plan for making the juice that is certified organic and raw. So the health department, they wanted to use all the chemicals, to make sure the product is extremely safe. And then we'd have to verify with the Department of Agriculture for the organic side where they wanted to avoid that stuff. So we had to have these meetings in between to try to find a happy medium all the way across. And, yeah, it was a very fun process.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
I remember, didn't they always request that they had to come stay at the Bellagio for a couple days?
Well, we did have, when you're certified organic, you do have inspectors that run an audit, kind of stay with your operation and just collect data. And they were usually available during the holiday weekends for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, lots of other useful stuff you learn to serve safe too. Like, there's proper ways to store things in the refrigerator. Like, for example, if you have meat and fish, those go on the bottom, and then above that you keep your stuff that you're going to be serving raw. What else? Oh, I remember Ari has a good tip for... Ari, don't you normally use a process where the person that's going to be... I don't remember how this was, but the person that's going to be using the machine is the one that has to assemble it in the morning or something? Or is it the other way around?
In terms of the juicer?
Well, cleaning, like after you clean the juicer at the end of the day, does the same person that cleans it reassemble it, or do you leave it for the person the next day to do it?
Yeah, they have to, after it's wash, rinse, sanitized, they build the machine back together, and then the person coming in, they actually break it down, wash, rinse, sanitize, because you never know what's going on after hours,
Yeah, and you're required under the, I don't know what guidelines, the HACCP guidelines to wash, rinse, and sanitize every 4 hours at a minimum?
That's just general food code. For every 4 hours of constant operation, you got to wash, rinse, sanitize the juicer. Same with taking temperatures.
Yeah, because that's what they have determined is like the time at which it takes harmful pathogens to multiply, right?
Yeah, there's kind of key numbers throughout the process, like you have something in your temperature danger zone. You have 4 hours to get it above or below that temperature. That directly goes with cleaning the equipment. 4 hours is kind of that key number for sure.
Okay, this is where I start my eyes start rolling in the back of my head, because I'm like, every single time that Department of Health has come into my restaurants, I get so, you have to be really nice to them, right? But I get like so annoyed because, I like studied all the way, have my MBA, like I'm fine being a student, but like I need to know what I need to know. And I don't like a pop quiz on something that I was never like shown the information. And I always say to chefs, my chef, even the Department of Health, I'm like, somebody give me the book. Like, just give me the book on where I'm supposed to know these things, because I get really annoyed if I miss like half a point on something that I didn't know. And so everybody's always like, there's no book. Like, you wouldn't read the book even if you had the book. And so much of it you just learn like on the ground, but there are things that are very common in a juice bar. Like, you can't, even if your produce is in a box, you can't have the box on the floor, right? It has to be above, what is it, chef, like 3 or 4 inches above. Like, I know I got that one time, and I like, not that I got into an argument, but I said to the inspector, of course I fixed it right away so that I would get credit back for fixing it. But because you can fix your mistake and get like a lesser point taken off. But I remember saying like, well, nobody ever told me this. Like, just tell me the rules and I'll follow the rules in this one time in my life. But so I think even just having a preliminary conversation, DHEC can be so scary in your own mind. They're always like pretty nice. I think you just like attribute them to like another government, you're like, it's like going to the DMV, like, oh my God, you're already like,
you're in the South, so they're nice over there.
Oh, they're
there's
nice
some areas where they're like, but
really?
What they want is, same thing as you, is they want to make sure you're putting out a safest product possible.
Right.
And it's great because the more experience they have, usually it's easier to deal with, because if something doesn't seem right, it's you got to ask the question, what's the reasoning behind this? Why are we doing it this way? Don't grill them on everything that they might catch in your operation, but if something doesn't make sense, ask them, and they should have a response. If not, do some research and make sure, verify.
Well, yeah, and I think juice bars fall in such a weird category anyways, at least down south, they never know how to treat us. And so I always love it when we have the same person over and over and over, because just like anything else, like what they're sticklers for. But for me, like I would love to be able to have the conversation with a chef if I'm new to say, hey, I have my first Department of Health, coming in. What are some things that I should know right off the bat? Because there isn't a damn book. I mean, I'm sure there is somewhere, but I don't have it. And, I think Ari could list off things like make sure things are labeled and dated, make sure there's no personal beverages, make sure there's no, your fruits are off, even if they're in a box, they have to be off the floor. Like there's, they're going to check your temperature of your juices. I mean, there's a million things. And not that he would probably list off every single thing, but being that he helps other juice bars all the time, a lot of them are pretty typical, but you don't want to come off as having like 50 things you have to change. It'd be a lot better if you were able to have a conversation with Chef Ari and then maybe have a few things that you had to change.
And you know what's great that's going to bring this thing full circle is when I was a chef in restaurants, I had the same inspector for 2-3 years. She retired and actually opened a consultant agency for out in Clark County in Las Vegas for, sanitation. Yeah. And I mean, she was able to go to operations. People would hire for consultants and as a consultant, teach the staff everything. And, since she was experienced in that, she was able to ask the questions that she knew that there's no reason behind it, as, and that kind of explains why you need a consultant for that as well. If you're not familiar with that.
You mean there's like some rules that don't make sense, but she knows they'll ask about or something?
Yeah, so it's kind of a thing where if you're in a position of power, someone asks you a question, sometimes you might just make it up, or not know the reasoning behind it. And it's a perfect example. If you're familiar with the process, you could actually ask the question on that and verify that that's true. So,
well, yes, and like, for instance, that comes up sometimes in juice bars because they don't know what square to put you in. Like you're not a coffee shop, you don't have an oven or a hood, and so even just dealing with the raw factor, sometimes they'll say things like, "Oh, you're required to have this, this, and that," and I'm like, "What? Why am I required to have that? I don't cook. I don't, like the whole grease trap situation. Like there's several things like that. Some of them you're just going to have because that person has to check off the box and their report is not completed until you check off the box. But some of them, they may be able to, write down like not applicable, but they've just never been in another juice bar. And so they don't know that that's, that it's not something that you need in your operation. So all in all, this sounds really daunting, but just call Chef Ari.
It's tough. Yeah. Some situations are extremely tricky, like if they're not familiar with juice bars, but feel free to reach out, and we'll try our best to try to assist you with that process.
I've heard of that grease trap issue before. We've had customers complaining that, well, I can't open my juice bar because they're telling me I need a grease trap and it's going to cost $40,000 to dig the grease trap out and install it. And I'm trying to explain to them that I don't need a grease trap because I don't have any grease or oil. And some health departments are like, yeah, well, you need one. So
yeah, it's actually for us, it's required by REWA, so our water source. And it's so interesting. Like we've gotten into this like big argument where we're like, why do we need a grease trap? There's no damn grease in here. We had to put it in and it is like $40,000. Or something like astronomical like that. And we never even cleaned it out. Like there's nothing, typically a service would come and would, take all of that out. Well, a restaurant just started building right next to us and they actually tapped in our grease trap and there was so much debris in there from the juicer, like of things that, chef was just like, or the back of the house was just spraying down the drain and it was going through the grease trap that they like charged us extra. They were like, you told us there was no grease and now you've got, we haven't cleaned out your grease trap in 7 years. And now you've got like, X amount of
now you're like, you're composting. Turns out you're composting in there.
Yeah. I'm like, you should be charging me for that compost. I mean, I should be charging you. But so it is, that's something new that just popped up for me where I've always been like, why do I need a damn grease trap? And then lo and behold, turns out I kind of do need one when you're doing the kind of production, and amount of juicing that we do. It's luckily if you're in like a shared space, there's likely already one there. And so you can, it's the beauty of a shared space.
Chef, what is a grease trap? What does it actually do?
Just collects the grease. I've actually heard,
but like it like stops it from going in the water drain. Is that what it does?
Yeah, I guess. Okay. I don't know 100%, but I know the grease destroys the pipes over time. So it's kind of like a specialty.
It like ciphers it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I've had one person out of like countless people mention that grease trap thing. One person was able to talk them out of it that they didn't need it. But I don't know. I think that was just kind of a random coincidence.
I think it honestly just goes back to where you are, who the local health inspectors are, how willing they are to actually have a conversation and realize that, well, you're right, you really don't need one, or they're just like, nope, just go and buy the book. You need a grease trap. But it's better to find that out up front. So reach out to your health department early instead of waiting till you're, sign a lease on your building. Because you could have figured that out before you signed that 5-year lease, And
a general contractor too, a local one, that'll be familiar with all the codes if you're doing that brick and mortar. Definitely important.
All right. Well, I think we can start to wrap this up. I think this was a really good episode. I hope it doesn't come off as just like an ad for Ari's Consulting, but I really do think it's important that people have access to a chef, whether it's on their team full time or it's an outsider, even if it's not Chef Ari, maybe somebody local or somebody through another restaurant owner, have access to somebody. It's kind of like as a business, like you need an accountant, right? If you're a small business, you might not need a full-time accountant, but you need one you can reach out to at tax time at least. So you can kind of think of it like that. So we are here for you if you need us. Check out goodnature.com/radio. We've got a form there. You can get on a call with Ari and Olivia. Also, we haven't had a voice message in a couple of weeks. It makes me really sad. I would really like it if somebody would leave us a voice message that I can play on the air about something you're struggling with in your juice business.
Somebody asked me something on my live yesterday, and I was like, put it in the voice box. Every time we like are together as a group or we're on a call and we start to talk about something and we kind of go back and forth.
Yeah.
Charlie's always like, save it for the podcast.
Yeah. Like,
he
stop
doesn't
talking.
let us talk about it. Like, hey, what do you think about this? Save it for the podcast. And so somebody said that yesterday. Somebody asked me something about, I answered a couple of general questions, but they asked me something and I was like, save it for the podcast. Nice. Drop us a voice note.
Yeah.
But Charlie, don't forget, they also have those forms for the front of the house.
The log.
That's been going really well. I think we have over like 40 or 50 people that have downloaded them. So, and I've been doing Zooms and FaceTimes with everybody that downloads one, just to kind of learn more about your operation, learn more about what we can do to help. If there's any holes in the market that maybe we can fill as a team. But really just kind of like, even for me, learning new trends that are happening across the country, what different people are struggling with. And so hopefully those logs are helpful for you. You can download those. I had a prep log.
They're actual documents Olivia uses in her juice bar to keep logs and track things. You can download those at the same place, goodnature.com/radio. And then Olivia will spam you and try to get on a call with you after you download that. And
I'll have every single person has said yes.
I know. No, I'm just kidding. So you can download those files there, get in touch with it there, leave us a voice message. Everything can be done there. And thank you, Chef Ari and Olivia, once again for taking the time out to help us educate the Good Nature family. And everyone, you can find us in the Good Nature Facebook group. Just go on Facebook and search for the Good Nature Juicing Facebook group. It's a private group, but we will let you in. As long as you're nice to us, we'll let you stay. And see everybody next week.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys. Ciao.
All right, see ya.
It's another Friday. This week I did it my way. I made lots of juice, and now I feel a boost. Baby say, oh, it's the way I make my juice. Pressing fruits and roots. This week I did it my way. Baby say, oh, now let's have some fun. There is nothing greater than Fridays at Goodnature.